So Pat, you are, for people who perhaps do not know this, you are a former House Representative of District 26. You have done, boy, some incredible things for our state and for our city. I'll also let it slip that she's my former landlord. So don't ask her how neat my house was while I live in her beautiful cottage. Pat, you have an amazing life that I would say is an adventure. You've had some incredible adventures. So talk to us about your earliest adventures and the kind of family that you grew up in.
I'm so glad, Amanda, that you started me off that way, because I am so privileged that sometimes I simply can't believe my good fortune. I'm a Washingtonian through and through. My parents were Washingtonians, my grandparents were Washingtonians, my great-grandparents were. We were raised with a love of the out-of-doors. My parents were unique in that they were the perfect match of an intellectual stimulus and of someone who also encouraged my sensitivity and my right-brainedness. I cannot stress enough of the foundation they gave me as I moved forward in my young life. The message that I got over and over again: take risks. Shove off from the top of any mountain you are. Do it. Just do it into the unknown. I got that message. I got the message that said, you're smart, you can do anything. I got the message that said, if you aren't curious, you're going to miss half of what the world has to offer. Now just get out there and do it, and we are here for you always. So with those messages ringing in my ear, also there was this underlying thing that said, don't be afraid. The world is a fearful place. But don't you be afraid, because you are here to help make things better. And there's going to always be an opportunity for you to do that, because that's what we are about, to making the world a better place for us to all live.
So, okay, I just need to stop it for a second, because so your parents taught you, Pat, that the world is a scary place and that there is fear, but you are there to arrive on the scene and to make that fear and therefore this world a better place. That is incredible.
Well, and I've just come to realize that as I went through the process of thinking about what I was going to talk about. And I ended up with many moments in my 77 years, will I say now, that I can peg to a place where I was, something that I was wearing, or some object that was there in front of me. And so my life in this journey of taking risks and shoving off into unknowns have a real marker. And I wanted to begin with one, if I could.
Absolutely.
And it was August of 1956, and I am sitting with 3 other friends. We are 18-year-olds, and we are about to take off on a 10-day trip around Mount Rainier on the Wonderland Trail, just the 4 of us. Now, for today's parents, I suspect they would not think their girls could do that, but for us, it was because we had been taught how to be competent, how to be confident and not fearful, how to take care of yourself. So this was the plan to end our high school career. We were going on this walk. And the reason why this means something to me is I think of what a different world it was. I had well-worn boys' work shoes because there were no girls' athletic hiking boots in those days. And that day that I remember is we were packing our backpacks. I had an old-fashioned, what was called a Trapper Nelson, with a bag attached to it, and the bag was brand new, so getting ready to go on this meant that I had to condition it a bit. And for the young women who are in the audience today, this is going to really amaze them. You don't go to the sporting goods store and buy a backpack, I had to take Kotex pads, put them on the straps of my pack with big, thick pieces of adhesive tape, wrap them tightly because that's what kept the pack from eating into my shoulder.
Yeah, oh, come on, that's sort of
Now, if you want to see this, all you have to do is go to the Washington History Museum because I took it over there the other day and says, this is a piece of ephemera you have to match.
And the Kotex are probably still intact, aren't they?
Because they're under so many layers of adhesive tape. But I really thought that that trip and that beginning was significant. 1973, when I was then fully engaged in the women's movement, that's when Title IX was passed, and now all of the young girls know nothing about a time when they didn't have equal rights to athletic fields. I Googled a couple of days ago Title IX, because that's the name of the act, and what came up? Title IX sports bra. It's like it's just minimized the whole thing of the adventure. In any case, I was glad to be out of high school. I was glad to be away from a world that wasn't nearly as ready to have me as I was ready to engage in substantive things, because that's what I learned at home. So I went off to Stanford in 1956. Stanford at the time was a men's university, and the ratio was 1 woman to 3 men. I was astounded to find that men were smart. I can hear that there is recognition of that as a novel idea lots of my times. And I then, had to really go to work. I loved it. I had come from a family where there was nothing more fun than a good intellectual debate at our breakfast table. And I found that was all around me. I just absolutely loved the academic part of it. But we're in the 50s, and there was a degree you were supposed to be going for. It was called the MRS.
MRS, Mrs.
The Mrs. degree. And now at Stanford, you'd think it would be easy because there's 1 woman, 3 men.
And they're not very smart.
And you have to throw something else in this. There was an adage at the time, 9 out of 10 California women are beautiful, and the 10th one goes to Stanford. So, in any case, I only bring this up because I did end up with a very fine young man whom I have now been married to for 55 years. Yeah. But he is... That wasn't an easy time. It was very, very difficult for me because I was seeing nothing but an open world for me. There was no barriers at all for what I might want to do. And it was real to me that I was going to further the cause of justice and I was going to bring peace to the world. And it's crazy how this can choke me up, but this was what I wanted to do. And always I knew peace, justice, and a world of wilderness preserved. Those were my 3 items that were driving me. So to find that instead, I might be going the direction of a Mrs. degree and give up all of that. I couldn't cope. And I ended up breaking my engagement in some psychological counseling, trying to make sense of the world that both wanted me and rejected me. This is the era when women in the late 50s, early 60s probably had the most difficult time of any era of breaking in to a new world, because we were recovering from the Second World War. Women were a Leave It to Beaver family kind of idea. And it was very, very difficult to feel like you could break that and bring happiness to yourself even, because the risks were so great. Ultimately, what happened, and this is not a happy story, what happened is I couldn't decide whether I was going to take the Foreign Service exam or I was going to go to law school. And John, bless him, was standing by trying to figure out what I was going to do. I texted him a little while ago and said, I can't believe you tolerated the way I strung you along. But I did not, I simply couldn't make my mind. So I went to see my counselors. And my major was international relations. That's what was going to get me into a world. I visualized being the United Nations. I visualized, well, it was a mission of peace. And my advisor looked me straight in the eye and said, Ms. Taylor, women in the Foreign Service wear sensible shoes. That was his advice. So I then walked over to my general advisor and said, I would like to take the LSATs for getting into law school. He looked me in the eye and he said, women make good lawyers, but lawyers don't make good women. That's the advice you got in a male school in 1960 when I'm trying to figure out how I can save the world. So the Mrs. degree won out, and John took me in spite of my wishy-washiness. The trauma came at graduation when I stood in my cap and gown and cried, just unabashedly heartbroken at the fact that I was leaving this environment that I figured was my last chance of intellectual stimulus. And my father, I mean, isn't this silly how you can get so emotional about this? But my father took me my shoulders and he shook me and he said, do you think your mother and I live a life of vacuum? You can do anything you want, and it's up to you to use that brain that God gave you. Now go out and do it. So now we are 3 years later, and I'm pregnant. I'm back in Washington. And we are in about the same situation. Lots gone by. John has gotten his MBA. I was that dutiful wife that supported him in graduate school. And I wonder how many of you know the impact of a woman named Betty Friedan. Well, I was with my mother visiting when I finished the book, The Feminine Mystique. And I looked at her, and this is when my mother could just excel. And I said, Mom, what am I going to do? She is describing my life future to me. I am going to have babies. I am going to have a happy husband. I am going to have a house that I have to take care of. But is that life? I can't do this. And then she proceeded to give me the lecture about this one privilege that we have, because we can make our own lives. And there are a million ways that you can go out, make a contribution, and still have the have it all kind of thing. But you're lucky. You've got the skills to do that. So soon after that, the world changed so greatly that I don't know if my mother's advice would have carried the day. But 2 weeks after my daughter was born in November, Kennedy was shot. Changed the world forever. And built on that, we then have the rapid changes of a world that Betty Friedan could never have ever anticipated, where we have the civil rights movement, we had the environmental movement, we had the feminist women movement, the Vietnam War protests, and I can tell you I was there in every single one of them. Every single one had me either marching or writing letters or I was involved in the newspaper, writing broadsides. I mean, I was there with my babies. I ended up with 3 on my back. And that 19th year of 1968, when I rocked in my rocking chair with a newborn, watching the world fall apart in front of me. The next little tick mark I have on my calendar that's very clear is in 1973, when I chaired the Gig Harbor Land Use Comprehensive Plan. It was unusual for a woman to be in that kind of position. I knew I was capable, and we had a staffer from the county who came over to run it. It's the first time I can really describe what it meant to be a feminist. And I guess I've been one all my life, but I didn't quite know what it was like. And he came in to tell us how to run the meeting, and he was pulling up his pants. And there was just something about him that I suddenly knew what it was like to make someone naked. And it was my red rage feminist self coming out. I stared at him, and there he was, stark nude. And at that point, I knew I had bettered him. And it's what drove me to law school. So we then moved on to law school. And at law school, it was somewhat like Stanford. There were some smart men there. The only difference was the ratio was about the same, but I was 20 years older than practically all the students. It was a heady time also. Law was then opening up to women very, very rapidly. The profession itself wasn't, but the study of law and the aspirations of women. So my notion then was that I was finally going to get my handle on the justice part of life, that this is what I was going to do. I graduated in 1980 from the University of Puget Sound School of Law because it came to me, and with the words of that advisor ringing in my ear, lawyers don't make good women. I had worried about it when I applied. The next thing, I'm in a mainline firm, and it turned out to be not satisfactory. It didn't because it's piecemeal work, and I'm still wanting to bring peace to the world and a just world and a environmentally comforting one. So, City Club. I ended up thinking, well, I can broaden my experience as a practicing lawyer by doing things in the community. There was a real sense of women's empowerment there in the early 80s. We had finally come into our own, but we had no forums. We had no place where we could interact with our peers, lawyers, professionals of all sorts. And that was the idea for City Club. Rotary at the time did not allow women. It was a very closed male organization. There was no place in our community where women and men worked together as equals solving community problems. It took hardly any effort in a way for Lily Warnick and I, who founded City Club, to get it off the ground. We had 600 members almost instantly because we